By the late 1930s, Japan had industrialized at a breathtaking clip. Its designers were turning out airframes that could stand shoulder to shoulder with anything in the West. And yet the system steering those machines was split right down the spine. The Imperial Japanese Army, IJA, and the Imperial Japanese Navy, IJN, didn't just bicker, they operated like two separate countries. Each branch ran its own playbook: strategy, diplomacy, intelligence, factories, and ammunition depots walled off from the other. They didn't share technology. They didn't share spares, weapons, or even fuel grades. The cost was predictable: poor manufacturing efficiency, wasted resources, and slower innovation just when the world was speeding up. Inside that divided house, each service built its own thoroughbred. The Navy fielded the Mitsubishi A6M0. The Army backed the Nakajima Ki-43 Hayabusa. Both prized the same party trick: knife-edge agility. Both were ultimately weakened by the same thing: a nation's air power cut in half by its own rivalry. By 1937, Japan's Army Air Force was fighting across China, where most enemy aircraft were relics, old biplanes like the Curtiss Hawk and other pre-war leftovers. Victories came easily, and those early triumphs planted a dangerous belief that tight-turn dogfights and extreme maneuverability were the keys to air superiority. So when the time came to replace the Ki-27, the Army issued a new set of demands. The next fighter had to fly faster, about 310 miles per hour. It had to climb faster, 3,300 feet per minute. It needed a combat range of roughly 500 miles. And above all, it had to turn just as tightly as the Ki-27. On paper, that combination defied physics. More speed and range meant more weight and drag. Agility demanded the opposite: light wings and minimal armor. But the Army's doctrine had hardened into dogma. Engineers at Nakajima weren't asked to question it, they were ordered to obey it. And in that single decision lay the seed of the Hayabusa's brilliance and its fatal flaw. The challenge landed on the desk of Nakajima Aircraft, the same company that had built the Army's beloved Ki-27. Leading the new effort was a young engineer named Hideo Itokawa, a man who would later earn fame as the father of Japan's post-war rocket program. In 1938, his team began sketching what the Army wanted, but physics forbade. By the end of that year, the blueprints were finished. And by early 1939, the first prototype was ready to fly. The design was bold for its time: a low-wing monoplane of all-metal construction, fully enclosed cockpit, and retractable landing gear. Power came from Nakajima's own HA-25, a 14-cylinder radial engine producing about 980 horsepower. Every ounce counted. Armor and self-sealing fuel tanks were deleted entirely to keep the weight-to-power ratio near the Army's sacred target of 2.15 kilograms per horsepower. Itokawa's team tried to keep the handling light by increasing wing area in proportion to the added weight, 50% more. But the drag penalty was disastrous. They scaled back to a modest 20% increase and introduced something new: butterfly combat flaps, a Fowler-type mechanism that dramatically tightened turning circles by boosting lift during hard maneuvers. In flight, the prototype danced like nothing else in the sky, but its wings flexed alarmingly under stress. It could turn tighter than ever before, yet break apart if pushed too far. The Hayabusa's legend of agility and fragility was born here. Flight testing began in 1939 at Ojima Airfield with 3 prototypes, and Army test pilots were far from impressed. They called the new fighter heavy, sluggish compared to the nimble Ki-27, and criticized its enclosed cockpit for poor visibility. Even the retractable landing gear, modern by Western standards, was dismissed as unnecessary complication. But Nakajima refused to give up. Confident in their design, the company built 10 additional test aircraft at its own expense between late 1939 and 1940. These featured a slimmer, lengthened fuselage, improved radio and cockpit layout, a wider canopy for better vision, and several upgrades, most notably the HA-105 engine with 1,100 horsepower and refined butterfly flaps. The results were undeniable. Superb maneuverability, able to loop and turn tightly at just 170 miles per hour. Yet under stress, wings still failed. Even so, in early 1941, the Army finally approved the fighter, christened Ki-43 Hayabusa, the Falcon. When production finally began, the new Hayabusa entered combat lightly armed, just 2 machine guns mounted in the nose. Some carried 7.7mm weapons, others the heavier 12.7mm type. But either way, its firepower lagged far behind Western fighters that carried 4, 6, or even 8 guns. Still, the Army pressed forward. By the time war broke out across the Pacific, only 56 Ki-43s were in service, divided between the 59th and 64th Sentai. They saw limited action at first, but their real debut came during the Malayan campaign. There, Japan's new Falcon tore into British lines. The RAF fielded the Brewster Buffalo, a chubby little fighter already outdated the day it arrived. Against the Hayabusa, it never stood a chance. British pilots believed they were fighting the famous Zero. Japanese pilots thought they'd met the Spitfire. Both were wrong, but the confusion says a lot. In the air, the Hayabusa flew like a ghost, turning tighter than anything the Allies could throw at it. During the campaign, the 59th and 64th claimed 43 enemy fighters and 18 bombers for the loss of just 16 of their own. It was the Hayabusa's finest hour, the brief moment when Japan's Army Zero truly ruled the skies. The Hayabusa's early victories hid a long list of flaws that would soon come due. The Ki-43 was a masterpiece of lightness, but that same lightness made it dangerously fragile. Its wings, already thin and highly stressed, were known to fail during steep dives. The structure simply couldn't handle the loads, and because the Army had refused to add pilot armor or self-sealing fuel tanks, even a single .50 caliber hit could turn the fighter into a torch in seconds. Its dive speed limit was far lower than Allied aircraft, a weakness enemy pilots quickly learned to exploit. The Americans called it boom and zoom, a fast diving pass, guns blazing, followed by a climb out of reach. The Ki-43 could twist and roll like a dancer, but it couldn't chase. To make matters worse, its telescopic gun sight, a carryover from earlier designs, was nearly useless in high-speed dogfights. Pilots had to aim by instinct, often firing without a clear sight picture. Behind these battlefield weaknesses was an even deeper problem: Japan's divided industry. The Army and Navy refused to share tooling, parts, or supply chains. Even ammunition wasn't compatible. The Army's 7.7 by 58mm rounds wouldn't fit the Navy's 7.7 by 56 SR guns. Spare parts, oil, spark plugs, tires, and hydraulic lines all came from separate supply systems. None of it could be swapped or shared. Every field base needed its own warehouses, its own convoys, its own mechanics trained on a different set of components. It was a logistical maze that drained manpower and slowed repairs. Production that looked strong on paper turned weak in practice. For every Hayabusa ready to fight, another sat grounded, waiting for the right part, or the right fuel, that only its own branch could provide. By 1942, the Army finally admitted the Hayabusa needed serious changes. The Ki-43-2 was the answer, entering full production the following year. It carried the upgraded HA-115 engine, rated at about 1,150 horsepower, spinning a new 3-bladed propeller. The wings were redesigned, shorter, stronger, and fitted with bomb racks for light attack work. The cockpit layout was improved, the pilot's seat gained armor protection, and the fuel tanks were now coated with rubber lining to provide at least a primitive form of self-sealing. The old telescopic sight was replaced by a modern reflector gun sight, and twin 12.7mm machine guns became standard. Performance climbed modestly. Top dive speed rose to around 400 miles per hour, 650 kilometers per hour, and handling remained crisp and precise. But even this improved Falcon couldn't keep pace with the new generation of Allied fighters, P-40, P-47, and the fast-climbing P-51s. It still lacked weight, power, and protection. But in a turning fight, the Hayabusa could still make a pilot smile. By 1944, Nakajima tried once more to squeeze new life out of the design. The Ki-43 introduced a 1,320 horsepower engine equipped with water methanol injection for short bursts of extra power. Engineers also experimented with a pair of Ho-5 20mm cannons, but space inside the nose was so limited that each gun carried only 60 rounds, barely enough for a few seconds of fire. It was powerful on paper, but impractical in combat. And with Nakajima now focused on the more modern Ki-84, only 10 prototypes were built. Even as newer types entered service, the Ki-43 still made up a large share of the Army's fighter strength. By 1945, its role had shifted from frontline superiority to desperate defense, scrambling to intercept B-24s and B-29s with little hope of success, or assigned to kamikaze missions as Japan braced for invasion. In August 1945, 4 Ki-43s clashed with 4 Soviet fighters over the Kuril Islands, a short, indecisive duel that became the Hayabusa's final flight in Japanese hands. What kept the Hayabusa deadly in its prime wasn't its metal. It was the men behind the controls. Early in the war, Japan's pilots were veterans, hardened by years of combat over China. They knew how to exploit the Ki-43's strengths, rolling, climbing, and slipping away with surgical precision. In skilled hands, its agility could turn a fragile airframe into a weapon of pure finesse. Among them stood legends like Satoshi Anabuki, credited with 39 aerial victories, one of Japan's top army aces. Pilots like him could make the Ki-43 seem invincible, darting through Allied formations and vanishing before the counterattack came. But as the war dragged on, those veterans were lost faster than they could be replaced. The new recruits who followed had little flight time and even less combat training. They couldn't use the Hayabusa's agility to survive. They exposed its weaknesses instead: its lack of armor, its tendency to burn, its brittle wings in a dive. In the wrong hands, agility meant nothing at all. By the time the war ended, more than 5,800 Ki-43s had been built, 3,190 by Nakajima, and 2,629 by Tachikawa, making it the second most produced Japanese fighter of the war. A few survived to serve briefly after 1945, in French Indochina, Indonesia, and China, where they flew under new colors in a world that had already moved on. The Hayabusa's reputation would outlive the war itself. It became known as the most maneuverable Japanese army fighter, and just as often, the most flammable. Its name came to represent an entire generation of aircraft that were too light, too late, and too fragile for the brutal pace of modern warfare. More than a machine, the Ki-43 was a mirror of Japan's wartime mindset, a nation that prized agility over endurance and doctrine over reality. Its story revealed the true cost of a divided industry and rigid thinking. As one historian later wrote, agility won Japan's early battles, but rigidity and doctrine lost the war. If you've ever seen a restored Ki-43 glinting under museum lights, or heard veterans talk about the Army Zero, tell us what it meant to you. Did its beauty outweigh its flaws? Or do you see it as a symbol of lessons learned too late? Share your thoughts below, your memories, your opinions, or your family's stories from that era. Give this video a like if you believe history's worth keeping alive, even when it's uncomfortable. And subscribe for more stories from the age when the world was built from rivets, courage, and mistakes. One warbird at a time.